The illusion of partnership. I stood at the base of the steps leading to the jet, the hum of the engines filling the air, the scent of burning fuel thick in my nostrils. The sun was setting behind the tarmac, casting long shadows, and yet, all I could focus on was my wife. My own wife, standing at the top of the stairs, arms crossed, gaze colder than I had ever seen it. "Only family is allowed," she said. The words didn't hit immediately. They hovered in the air for a moment, as if they needed time to process, to sink their claws into my chest. I laughed, not out of amusement, but out of sheer disbelief. "That's a joke, right?" She didn't flinch, didn't even blink, just tilted her head slightly, impatient. "You're not on the list. Only board members and family are invited to this trip." Board members? Family? I clenched my jaw. "And what exactly am I, Sophia?" She sighed, exasperated, like I was some clueless intern, not the man who built her empire with his own 2 hands. "Look, you knew this was a strategic business retreat. There's no point in making this personal." "No point?" I took a slow, deliberate step back, scanning the faces already seated inside. The company I built, the product I created, the team I personally trained. And yet, I was the outsider? "Understood," I said, my voice even. I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me react. I refused to let her think she had the power to break me. Her assistant stepped forward, already motioning to security, as if I was some nobody loitering on the runway. The sheer audacity of it almost made me laugh again. I took another step back, watching as the jet doors sealed shut, as the engines roared to life, as my wife, my supposed partner, took off without me. I stood there, watching as the jet shrank into the horizon. My reflection in the glass windows of the terminal showed a man I barely recognized. A man who had given everything and was left with nothing. No, that wasn't true. She thought she had erased me from her success? She had just made the biggest mistake of her life. Because if she wanted me gone, if she truly wanted to wipe away my presence from the empire we built together, then I would do something even better. I would erase her empire entirely. The beginning of us. I remember the first time I saw Sophia. She wasn't the woman she is today. Polished, ruthless, sitting atop an empire that bore my fingerprints but none of my name. No, back then, she was scrappy, fighting tooth and nail to keep her failing tech startup from crashing into the abyss of forgotten ideas. I had heard about her before I met her. She had a reputation in the industry, not for innovation, but for her ability to sell a vision. She could talk. Investors loved her because she had the confidence of someone who belonged in boardrooms, even if she didn't fully understand the technology she was pitching. And that's where she was struggling. Sophia had connections. She had influence. But she lacked the foundation. The raw, unshakable substance to back up the dreams she spun in investor meetings. And then there was me. A software engineer, but not just any engineer. I had something people had been chasing for years. A revolutionary algorithm that could change the industry. Hypersync. It started as a passion project in my small, dimly lit apartment, the kind of thing tech nerds dream about but never expect to go anywhere. An AI-driven automation software that could optimize business operations in real time, adapting without human intervention. It was brilliant. It was unstoppable. It just needed the right stage. And Sophia? She had the stage. Our paths crossed at a tech summit. I had barely been able to scrape together enough money for a ticket, spending the last of my savings to be in a room filled with people who didn't even know my name. Meanwhile, she was there as a guest speaker, talking about innovation while her own company was circling the drain. She saw me before I even saw her. I was in the demo hall, showing a group of skeptical attendees what Hypersync could do on my laptop. The moment the screen displayed its seamless adaptability, data flows updating in real time, entire business infrastructures recalibrating with zero lag. I saw her watching me from across the room. She waited until the crowd thinned before she approached. "You made this?" There was something sharp about her tone, something calculated. I nodded. "Yeah." She smiled, but it wasn't the polite kind. It was the kind that hinted at opportunity. "I think we need to talk." A deal that changed everything. That conversation lasted hours. She asked questions, real questions, not just about the technology, but but about me, who I was, what I wanted, what my endgame was. I told her the truth. I don't care about fame. I just want this to exist. I want it to be used. That's when she said the words that altered my entire future. You have the brains. I have the resources. We'd be unstoppable together. It was the perfect pitch. She told me about her struggling startup, how she was on the verge of losing investor confidence. But if we merge your software with my infrastructure, we can redefine the industry. It wasn't just flattery. It was real. And for the first time, I saw a path forward for my work that didn't involve me sitting alone in a dark room, hoping someone took notice. So I said yes. From two strangers to partners. The next few years were a blur of hard work, late nights, and blind faith. I poured my entire soul into refining Hypersync, making it sharper, faster, more adaptive than anything the world had ever seen. Meanwhile, Sophia worked her magic, securing funding, partnerships, press coverage. It was exhilarating. We weren't just business partners. We were equals. Or at least, that's what I thought. Somewhere along the way, the late-night strategy meetings turned into shared dinners. The professional admiration turned into something deeper. Before I even realized it, I was in love with her. I saw her as the person who believed in me when no one else did. She saw my potential, championed my work, fought to bring it into the world. And in return, I trusted her completely. We got married before the company even took off. It felt like a natural step, like we were sealing our commitment not just to each other, but to our vision. Hypersync wasn't just a company. It was our child, the thing we built together, the thing we were going to share forever. Or so I thought. The first red flag. At first, it was small things. Sophia would take press interviews alone, brushing off my presence as if I was just some behind-the-scenes tech guy. The investors started associating Hypersync solely with her, treating me as if I was her employee rather than her co-founder. I noticed that, in meetings, she would correct people who referred to Hypersync as our company, subtly shifting the language to imply that it was hers. I didn't say anything. I convinced myself that it didn't matter. We were a team, weren't we? What was the point in arguing over something as petty as credit when we were both reaping the rewards of our success? But looking back, that was the moment the balance shifted. That was when I should have seen the warning signs. Because Sophia wasn't just ambitious. She wasn't just driven. She was hungry. And soon, I would find out just how much she was willing to consume to stay on top. The shift in power. At first, it was easy to ignore the changes. Success does that. It blinds you to the little details, the subtle shifts and dynamics that don't seem important until it's too late. When we were struggling, when we were fighting together to make Hypersync a reality, there was no room for ego. No space for power struggles. We were two halves of a whole, working toward the same goal. But once the money started rolling in, once the investors started throwing millions at us, everything changed. Or maybe she changed. At first, the changes were so gradual that I barely noticed them. She took on more media interviews, and I let her. It made sense. Sophia was the face of the company, the one who charmed investors, who made deals happen. She had the personality for it, the confidence, the connections. I was fine being in the background. I wasn't in it for the fame. Then, slowly, the language changed. At board meetings, she stopped referring to our company. It became her company. Hypersync is a product of my vision, she'd say. When I started this company, I knew we were going to revolutionize the industry. I'd sit there, forcing a smile, nodding, convincing myself that the wording didn't matter, that she didn't really mean it that way. But it wasn't just words. She started making executive decisions without me. A major partnership with a government agency? I found out through a press release. A new expansion strategy that shifted focus away from my original vision? She discussed it with the board before consulting me. The company's branding was suddenly centered entirely around her. The official website no longer listed me as co-founder, just as lead developer. I confronted her about it once, sitting in our sleek, glass-walled office overlooking the city. Sophia, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, we built this together. Why do I feel like I'm being pushed out? She sighed, barely looking up from her laptop. You're overthinking it. Investors like a strong leader, someone they can rally behind. The public likes a face they can recognize. We both know you're not comfortable with that. I frowned. That's not the point. The point is, you're erasing me from the story. She laughed, shaking her head. Don't be dramatic. Everyone knows you're a part of this. That was a lie. The world didn't know, because she had made sure of it. The biggest mistake of my life. Then came the share transfer. Sophia called it a strategic move. We need to consolidate our power, she had said, lounging on the couch in our penthouse, sipping wine like we weren't talking about the future of my life's work. The board thinks it would be more stable if all major shares were under one name. Less legal complications, fewer risks when making bold moves. I frowned, my gut twisting. What risks? She waved a hand dismissively. Nothing serious. Just a formality, really. It won't change anything between us. What's yours is mine, and what's mine is yours. I should have seen it. I should have questioned why she was suddenly so eager to merge everything into her control. But I didn't. Because I trusted her. Because I was a fool. And so, I signed the documents. I signed away my stake in the company. My official ownership. My control. Sophia smiled as she kissed me on the cheek. See? We're a team. This just makes things cleaner. I remember holding the pen a moment too long before setting it down. Something in the back of my mind told me I had just made the biggest mistake of my life. And I had. The unraveling. After that, everything spiraled faster than I could stop it. Sophia grew bolder. She started hosting exclusive executive meetings that I wasn't invited to. When I asked her about them, she shrugged. It's just business strategy. You don't like boardroom politics anyway. The next week, I found out that my personal projects within the company were being reassigned to new leads. My teams were being told to report to her directly. Then came the final blow. The company was preparing for a massive global expansion, an event that would be the biggest milestone in Hypersync's history. I should have been front and center, should have been one of the key people leading the charge. Instead, Sophia scheduled a private jet trip for the board, an exclusive strategy retreat. I wasn't invited. I only found out when I saw the itinerary sitting on her desk. I confronted her. You didn't even tell me about this trip? She barely looked up. I didn't think you'd be interested. It's more of a PR move than anything. You've always hated that stuff. I stared at her, the realization settling like a weight in my chest. I co-founded this company, Sophia. She sighed, clearly bored with my objections. Yes, and you'll still be here when we get back. What's the big deal? The big deal was that she had made it perfectly clear where I stood. The big deal was that she had already decided I was expendable. I clenched my fists. I gave up everything for this company. For you. Finally, she looked up, but there was no regret in her eyes. No hesitation. Just a cool, detached confidence. And it's appreciated, she said. But things evolve. You can't take this personally. The beginning of my revenge. That was the moment it all crystallized. The moment I stopped fooling myself. She wasn't my partner anymore. She wasn't my wife. She was my enemy. And soon, she would realize just how much damage I could do. The betrayal in the sky. The moment I stepped onto the tarmac, I felt it. That strange, hollow sensation in my gut. The one that told me something wasn't right, even before I had a reason to confirm it. It was the same feeling I had the day I signed over my shares to Sophia, the same quiet whisper of something shifting beneath my feet. Only this time, I wouldn't ignore it. I walked toward the jet, the heat of the engines pulsing through the air. I could already see the others boarding, executives, board members, a few of the senior engineers I had personally mentored, people I had built this empire with. It was supposed to be a celebration, the company's biggest expansion yet. A milestone that should have belonged to both of us. But the moment I reached the bottom of the stairs, she was there, standing at the top, arms folded, looking down at me with something unreadable in her expression. I frowned. You coming down? She didn't move. Instead, she gave me a small, cool smile and said words that I would never forget. Only family is allowed. It took a second to register. A second too long. I let out a short laugh. Because surely, this was a joke? What? But she didn't laugh with me. She didn't even blink. You're not on the list, she said, her voice even. It's a private retreat, strictly for board members and family. Something in my chest turned to ice. The company I built, the product I created, the legacy I poured my life into, and I wasn't even considered part of it anymore. I looked at the others already inside. People who used to answer to me, who once called me their mentor, their leader. Some of them wouldn't even meet my eyes. And I knew then. They had known about this. They had all known. I took a slow step back, scanning her face for any hint of regret, any sign that she was second-guessing herself. There was none. "You're serious," I said quietly. She sighed. "This isn't personal. The board just thought it would be best if we moved forward with a more streamlined leadership structure." A more streamlined leadership structure. I wanted to ask her when she had decided to become the enemy. When exactly she had gone from being my partner to being the person who had engineered my removal from my own company. But I didn't. Because I already knew. The moment everything changed, I could have fought it, could have argued, could have demanded she tell me the real reason she was doing this. But I didn't. Because in that moment, standing at the base of that jet, feeling the heat of the sun on my face, hearing the distant hum of engines ready to take off without me, I saw the bigger picture. This wasn't just a business trip. It was a statement, a declaration. Sophia wasn't just excluding me from this trip. She was excluding me from everything. She was rewriting history, erasing my name, making it so that when the story of Hypersync was told, I was nothing more than a footnote in her success. And if I fought her here, if I made a scene, if I begged, then I would be exactly what she wanted me to be, a desperate man clinging to something that was no longer his. So I made a decision. I took a slow, measured breath, forcing my pulse to steady. And then, I stepped back. I nodded once, keeping my voice even. "Understood." Sophia blinked, just for a fraction of a second. She had expected me to react differently, expected me to fight, to argue, to beg for my place. But I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. Instead, I turned away, walked off the tarmac, and listened as the engines roared to life behind me. I didn't look back. Not when the wheels lifted off the ground. Not when the jet disappeared into the sky. Not when my entire world was supposedly leaving without me. Because she thought she had one. She thought she had finally cut me out completely. She had no idea she had just handed me the ultimate revenge. The birth of my plan. By the time I reached my car, my mind was already working. Sophia had spent years convincing herself that she was untouchable, that she was the true mastermind behind Hypersync, that I was just a technical footnote in her empire. And because of that, she had made a fatal mistake. She had forgotten who built this company from the ground up. She had forgotten who created the foundation that held it together. She had forgotten that the core of everything, the software, the security, the very system that powered Hypersync, was still mine. And now, I had nothing left to lose. The last thing she expected. As I drove away from the airstrip, my hands tightened on the wheel. She had taken everything from me. But there was one thing she didn't take. Something she didn't even realize was still in my possession. The source code. The security keys. The backdoor I had built into the system from the very beginning. A safety measure, a kill switch, something I had installed in the early days when I still believed that we were in this together. She thought she had shut me out. She thought she had erased me. She thought she had one. But she had no idea. Because now, for the first time since this all began, I was no longer playing defense. Now, I was going to take everything back. Not just my company. Not just my legacy. I was going to erase her empire, brick by brick, line by line, until there was nothing left but ashes. The first strike. I didn't go home that night. There was no point. The house, the penthouse we had bought together when Hypersync's valuation hit its first billion, felt more like a museum now. A carefully curated display of her success, where my presence had been reduced to little more than an afterthought. No, I needed to be somewhere else. Somewhere quiet, where I could think, where I could plan. So I drove to the one place that still felt undeniably mine. The private development server I had rented out years ago when Hypersync was still an idea, a dream I had coded into existence line by line. No one knew about it. Not Sophia, not the board, not even the engineers who worked under me. This was my failsafe. And tonight, it would become the beginning of her downfall. The code no one knew existed. Hypersync wasn't just another tech company. It was an ecosystem, a self-sustaining automation network that powered everything from high-frequency trading firms to global supply chains. It was designed to be impenetrable, its security layers tighter than any government system. But there was one flaw, a flaw I had built in from the very beginning. Back when Sophia and I were still partners, when I still believed in us, I had written a private failsafe into the source code. Not as an act of paranoia, but as a safety measure. A way to reclaim control if anything ever went wrong. It was buried deep, hidden beneath layers of encrypted pathways, masked as an unassuming, rarely accessed subroutine. To anyone else, it looked like a dormant function, a harmless fragment of forgotten code. But to me, it was a kill switch. The first move. I logged in. The familiarity of the interface, the blinking cursor, the silent hum of a system waiting for input. It all felt like stepping into my true home. She thought she had locked me out of my own empire. But she was wrong. With a few keystrokes, I accessed the master framework. I took my time. Sophia was on a plane, surrounded by her new board, her loyal executives, basking in her illusion of power. She wouldn't see this coming. She never did. First, I ran a diagnostic. The numbers flashed across the screen. Hundreds of servers. Millions of active users, a network worth billions, and all of it was still tied to my code. Then, I executed the first command, a simple one, a security reconfiguration. On the surface, nothing changed. Hypersync continued running as usual, but beneath the surface, every executive-level access key was revoked. No one, not Sophia, not the board, not a single top-level employee, could log in or make any critical system changes. Except for me. I leaned back, watching as the system reset itself. She wouldn't notice immediately. Not yet. But soon, very soon, she would wake up to a world where she was no longer in control. The next morning, my phone rang at 6:07 a.m. I didn't answer. It rang again and again. Finally, I picked up, just to hear her voice, sharp and frantic. "Aaron," she snapped. No greeting, no pretense, just pure panic. "Hypersync is locked down. We can't access anything. What the hell did you do?" I smiled. It was satisfying, listening to the cracks in her usually composed demeanor, hearing the underlying fear in her voice. I kept my tone casual. "Good morning, Sophia. Something wrong?" She exhaled sharply, frustration clear in every syllable. "Don't play games. The system is rejecting all executive logins. The entire board is locked out. The engineers can't override it. I know you did something." I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the silence between us. Then, I said the words I knew she never expected to hear. "Sorry, but only family is allowed." The moment she knew, there was dead silence on the other end of the line. I could almost picture her, standing in some luxury resort, phone clenched in her hand, her carefully constructed world starting to fracture. She started, but I cut her off. "Let's get one thing straight, Sophia," I said, my voice cold now. "You didn't build Hypersync. I did. You didn't design the system. I did. You don't own it. I do." She tried to interrupt, but I kept going. "And if you think for 1 second that you can erase me from the company I created, then you don't understand the first thing about how any of this works." A sharp inhale. Then, her voice dropped to something more dangerous. "You think you can take it back?" She hissed. "You think you can win?" I let out a short laugh. "Sophia," I said, leaning forward, lowering my voice like I was letting her in on a secret. "I already did." Then, I hung up. The beginning of her end. By the time she landed, it was too late. Hypersync's security system had been completely overhauled. All critical operations required my biometric authentication. The board was in shambles, investors demanding answers. And Sophia? For the first time, she realized what she had done. She had undermined me. She had betrayed me. She had shut me out of my own empire. But in doing so, she had forgotten something far more important. I was the one who had built this from nothing. I knew every line of code, every system flaw, every hidden failsafe. And now, I was going to burn it to the ground. The collapse begins. I didn't go back to sleep after hanging up on Sophia. I just sat there, staring at my phone, watching as the missed calls piled up, one after another, her name flashing over and over like a desperate heartbeat. By 7 a.m., the calls stopped, not because she had given up, but because she had finally realized the truth. This wasn't just a minor system glitch. This wasn't something her engineers could patch in a few hours. This was the beginning of the end, and I had written the script. The desperation begins. At exactly 8:15 a.m., I got a text. Not from Sophia. From one of my old engineers. Someone who had been loyal to me before Sophia started restructuring the company to squeeze me out. They're panicking. The board is losing its mind. She's trying to call an emergency meeting, but no one can access anything. What did you do? I smirked, typing back slowly, just reminding them who built the system. Her first attempt to fix it. Sophia was smart. I had to give her that. She didn't waste time. She called in every expert she could find. Top-tier cybersecurity specialists, former government encryption analysts, even a few of my old team members she had kept around after I left. They all ran into the same wall. The lockout wasn't just a simple admin-level restriction. It was a deep structural override, something embedded so far into the system that even if they tried to rewrite access pathways, the code would rebuild itself in real time. Hypersync was shutting her out at the DNA level, and there was only one person who could unlock it. Me. The first call from the board. By 10 a.m., my phone rang again. Not Sophia this time. One of the board members. I let it ring twice before answering. Aaron, the voice on the other end said, strained but carefully measured. We seem to have encountered a technical issue. I assume you're aware of it? I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch for a moment before answering. I might be. A pause. Then, a shift in tone. Less businesslike, more frustrated. What the hell are you playing at? The entire company is on lockdown. We're bleeding millions by the second. I glanced at my laptop screen, where the live feed of Hypersync's stock price was already plummeting. I could almost hear the panic in their voices from here. You'll have to be more specific, I said, feigning confusion. Are you asking for my professional expertise, or just yelling for the sake of it? More silence. Then, a reluctant exhale. We need your help. There it was. The first crack in their arrogance. I tapped my fingers against the desk, considering my next words carefully. You need my help, I repeated. Funny, because just last week, Sophia made it very clear that I was no longer a part of Hypersync. You were never removed, the board member said quickly. That was a misunderstanding. Save it. My voice dropped. You locked me out of my own creation. You let her erase my name, strip my influence, humiliate me. And now that everything is falling apart, you want my help? The silence stretched long this time. I could feel his discomfort, his anger, his helplessness. Then, finally, what do you want? I smiled. Nothing. Yet. Then I hung up. Sophia's breaking point. By noon, she finally cracked. She didn't call. She showed up at my door. I wasn't surprised. Sophia wasn't the type to beg over the phone. She needed to be in control, needed to stand in front of someone and make them see her authority. Except this time, she didn't have any. I opened the door to find her standing there in a sharp, designer suit, looking impeccable as always. But there was something different in her eyes. For the first time since this war started, she looked afraid. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. To what do I owe the pleasure? She exhaled sharply, her jaw tightening. Let me in. I didn't move. No. Her eyes flared. Aaron, I don't have time for games. I smiled. Neither do I. She hesitated, then forced herself to take a breath, calm her tone. Look, she said. We can fix this. We? I echoed, raising an eyebrow. Last time I checked, there was no we anymore. You made sure of that. Her lips pressed together. I made a mistake. I laughed. A real, sharp laugh. Oh, now it's a mistake? When you left me standing on the tarmac like an outsider, when you let your board replace me, when you stole everything I built and acted like I never existed? Her fingers curled into fists at her sides. I did what I had to do for the company. Then do what you do best, Sophia, I said. Talk your way out of this. Convince the board you've got it all under control. Because as far as I'm concerned, this isn't my problem anymore. Her breath hitched. Just for a second. She was losing control. I stepped forward, lowering my voice to something almost dangerous. Hypersync was mine before it was ever yours, I said. And now? You don't own it anymore. You can't do this, she whispered. This is my life, Aaron. I tilted my head. Funny. You didn't care about that when you erased my life from the company. She swallowed hard. For the first time, she didn't have a response. So I leaned in, delivering the final blow. Consider this your first lesson in losing everything, I murmured. Then I shut the door in her face. The chaos spreads. By evening, the fallout had spread. Investors began pulling out, terrified of the instability. Customers started losing access to Hypersync services, causing major corporations billions in potential losses. News outlets began reporting on the crisis inside Hypersync, hinting at an internal sabotage. And Sophia? She had no way out. Because the only person who could fix it was me. And I had no intention of saving her. I was only getting started. The company in free fall. I woke up the next morning to chaos. Not my own. Hers. Sophia's empire, the one she had spent years crafting while erasing my name from it, was burning to the ground. And she knew it. The first thing I did was check the stock reports. Hypersync had dropped another 30% overnight. By now, it wasn't just investors panicking. The companies that relied on Hypersync's AI were starting to feel the impact. Logistics networks were failing. Banking systems were glitching. AI-driven trading firms were hemorrhaging millions because they couldn't access the software's real-time market predictions. And through it all, I sat back, sipping my coffee, watching the world slowly realize the truth. Hypersync wasn't Sophia's creation. It was mine. And without me, it was collapsing. The board's last-ditch effort. By mid-morning, my phone rang again. The board. Not Sophia this time. They must have finally realized that she wasn't in control anymore. I let it ring a few times before answering. Gentlemen, I said smoothly, to what do I owe the pleasure? We need to talk, came the clipped response. This has gone on long enough. I smiled. Has it? You're going to kill the company, another voice snapped. Do you have any idea how many billions are at stake? We can negotiate, but this? I cut him off. Funny. No one cared about my stake when you all let Sophia push me out. So why should I care now? Silence. Then, the voice softened. Look, whatever personal grievances you have against Sophia, we can fix it. Just restore access to the system, and we'll? I chuckled. You think this is about grievances? They didn't get it. They still thought this was just about revenge, about me throwing a tantrum because I got left out of a boardroom. They didn't understand that I wasn't fighting for my place back in the company. I was tearing it apart from the inside out. You had your chance, I said, my tone calm but firm. You chose your side. Now, you get to watch what happens next. Then I hung up. Sophia's desperation grows. By noon, my apartment intercom buzzed. I didn't even have to check to know who it was. Sophia. She was running out of options, and I was the only person left who could stop the bleeding. I took my time opening the door. Let her stew in her own panic for a few extra seconds. When I finally let her in, she didn't even waste time pretending to be composed. Her usual confidence, the steel-spined, ice-veined presence she carried in boardrooms, was gone. Her hair was slightly out of place. Her breathing was too sharp. And her eyes? They weren't angry. They weren't even furious. They were scared. We need to fix this, she said immediately, stepping into my apartment like she still had authority over me. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Fix what? She exhaled sharply, dragging a hand through her hair. Hypersync. The system. Whatever you did, you need to undo it. Why would I do that? Her jaw clenched. Because the entire company is falling apart. This is bigger than just you and me, Aaron. If you keep this up, Hypersync will be finished. I gave her a slow, measured look. Good. Her breath hitched. Just a little. Enough for me to see the moment it truly hit her. I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't waiting for a deal, a payout, or an apology. I was watching her empire collapse and enjoying every second of it. The reality of her situation. You don't understand, she said, trying to recalculate, trying to find the right leverage to regain control. This is going to cost you too. Your name is still tied to Hypersync. Your reputation? My reputation? I interrupted, laughing. You mean the one you spent years burying? The one you erased from every press release, every article, every award you took credit for? She flinched. I took a step forward, lowering my voice. I don't care about Hypersync anymore, Sophia. I care about watching you lose everything you stole from me. Her lips parted, but no words came. Because now, for the first time, she truly understood. This wasn't about business. This wasn't about the board, or the company, or the stock price. This was personal, and there was no fixing it. The last attempt. She swallowed, visibly forcing herself to soften. Aaron, she said, her voice lowering, trying to sound like the woman I once loved. We built this together. You don't have to destroy it. We can start over. We can. I smiled. No, Sophia. Her mouth snapped shut. I stepped closer, until there was barely any space between us, and said the words that finally broke her. You already did that, I whispered. The moment you looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't family anymore. Tears burned in her eyes. Real ones. I had seen Sophia fake cry in business meetings before. I had watched her manipulate emotions like a master chess player. But this was real. She knew it was over. I stepped back, keeping my expression neutral. You should go, I said simply. Her breath shuddered. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out. The final blow. By evening, the news headlines were everywhere. Hypersync faces unprecedented crisis as CEO Sophia, last name, fails to regain control. Investors flee as Hypersync's stock crashes. Was Hypersync's true genius erased from history? And the best part? The media was finally digging into the truth. Interviews with former employees. Old articles mentioning my name before it was wiped from company records. Whispers about how maybe Sophia hadn't been the real mastermind after all. By midnight, Hypersync had lost half its valuation. And Sophia? She was finished. Not just as CEO. As a legend, a business icon. A name that once commanded respect in every boardroom. Because now, the world knew. She wasn't the woman who built Hypersync. She was the woman who lost it. And I was the man who made it happen. The final blow. The morning after Sophia walked out of my apartment, the world had already shifted. Her empire was crumbling in real time, and this time, there was no coming back. I watched the news unfold over a cup of coffee, my laptop open, multiple stock reports flashing across the screen. Hypersync had lost 60% of its valuation overnight. Sophia had spent years building an image of power, control, and innovation, convincing the world that she alone was the force behind Hypersync's success. But in the span of 24 hours, that illusion had been shattered. The media vultures who once worshipped her were now tearing her apart, picking at every flaw, every decision she had made, every questionable tactic she had used to climb to the top. It was almost poetic. She had spent so much time erasing me from the company's history, convincing herself that she had all the power. But now, she was just another fallen CEO. Another scandal-ridden executive whose name was being dragged through the mud. And the best part? I wasn't done yet. The day of reckoning. By midday, my phone buzzed again. Not from Sophia this time. From her lawyer. I let it ring. Twice. Then, I answered. Yes? There was a pause, then a calm, measured voice. Mr. Carter, we'd like to discuss an arrangement to... No. Silence. Excuse me, the lawyer asked. I leaned back in my chair, stretching out my legs. I said no. There's no arrangement. No deal. No negotiation. The voice on the other end didn't waver, but I could hear the underlying tension. Mr. Carter, Sophia is willing to make certain concessions. I laughed. Actually laughed. Sophia doesn't have anything left to bargain with, I said. She lost her company, her investors, her reputation. So tell me, what exactly is she offering? A longer pause this time. Then, The lawyer tried a different angle. We're willing to restore your position at Hypersync. You'd be reinstated as co-founder and… I cut him off. Hypersync doesn't exist anymore, I said smoothly. At least, not in the way she thinks it does. Silence. Then, a breath. What do you mean? I smiled. You'll see soon enough. And then, I hung up. The final stage. By late afternoon, I was ready. I had been waiting for this moment, planning for it. The collapse of Hypersync wasn't enough. I needed to rebuild it, but under my name this time. So I made the final move. With a few keystrokes, I executed the last phase of my takeover. Hypersync's patents? Transferred. The AI's core structure? Migrated. The original technology? Sealed. Every valuable asset that made Hypersync a billion-dollar company was no longer under Sophia's control. The company still existed in name, but its soul, its foundation, its power, it was mine again. Sophia's last desperate attempt. At 7 p.m., I got one last text. From her. Not her lawyer. Not the board. Her. Meet me. One last time. Hotel Langford. 8 p.m. I stared at the message, debating whether to even bother entertaining it. Then, I decided. I would go. Not because she deserved another conversation, but because I wanted to see the look in her eyes when she realized it was over. The final meeting. I arrived exactly at 8 p.m. The hotel bar was nearly empty, the dim lighting casting long shadows over the polished mahogany. I spotted her immediately. Sophia sat in the corner booth, a glass of untouched wine in front of her. She looked different. Not broken. Not defeated. Just tired. I took my time walking over, watching as she lifted her gaze to meet mine. Didn't think you'd come, she murmured. I slid into the seat across from her, resting my arms on the table. I was curious. She let out a soft, humorless chuckle. Curious about what? I studied her, taking in the small changes, the tension in her shoulders, the faint, dark circles under her eyes, the way she wasn't wearing the armor of control anymore. Then, I said, how it feels. She stilled. How what feels? I tilted my head, losing everything. She inhaled sharply, and for a moment, she looked like she was going to snap back, like she was going to fight me one last time. But she didn't. Instead, she looked down at her glass. You were always the smarter one, she admitted quietly. I just talked better. I leaned forward. You stole from me, Sophia. You erased me. And you expected me to just accept it. She swallowed hard. I thought you wouldn't fight back. I gave her a slow, humorless smile. That was your first mistake? She exhaled, gripping the stem of her glass. And your first mistake? I shrugged. Trusting you. A long silence stretched between us. Then, softly, she said, I never stopped loving you, you know? I didn't react, didn't flinch. I just watched her. Because now, I could see what she was doing. The last attempt, the last manipulation, trying to pull me back in, to make me feel something for her again. But that part of me, the part that once would have believed her, once would have wanted to forgive her, was already dead. So I stood up, slid my hands into my pockets, and delivered the final blow. I stopped loving you the second you told me I wasn't family. Her breath caught. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. Not when she called my name. Not when she let out a shaky breath, trying to hold back tears. Not when I stepped out of the hotel, into the night, leaving her alone with everything she had lost. And as I walked away, I knew one thing for certain. This was the last time I would ever see Sophia again. Her new reality. Sophia didn't reach out again after that night. Not a call. Not a text. Nothing. I wasn't surprised. Because what was left to say? She had spent years crafting her own mythology, convincing the world that she was the mastermind behind Hypersync, the one who had built it from the ground up. And for a while, the world had believed her. But now? Now, she was a cautionary tale. The headlines wrote themselves. The morning after our final meeting, the news had already devoured her whole. From CEO to scandal, the fall of Sophia Callaway. Hypersync implodes. Was it built on lies? Once a tech icon, now a pariah. Sophia Callaway's stunning downfall. The press had been brutal, relentless. Every interview she had given, every moment she had taken credit for my work, every deal she had made while pushing me further into the background. It was all under the microscope now. Former employees came forward. Investors publicly distanced themselves. Even her most loyal supporters started walking away, realizing that aligning with her was a sinking ship. And the final blow? Hypersync's board of directors had voted her out. She was officially removed as CEO. A public statement had been released, filled with corporate doublespeak, but the message was clear. Sophia Callaway was no longer the face of the company. She wasn't anything anymore. The consequences she never saw coming. For the first time in years, she was nobody. No more corporate events. No more keynote speeches. No more front-page headlines celebrating her success. Just radio silence. I heard through a mutual contact that she had been trying to sell her remaining shares, desperate to salvage whatever money she could. But with the company in freefall, her stock was practically worthless. She had lost everything. And I had taken it all away from her. My own empire rises. But while she was fading into obscurity, I was doing the opposite. 2 weeks after her removal, I announced something new. Not a company revival. A rebirth. SyncForge. A new AI-driven platform. Sharper, faster, smarter than anything Hypersync had ever been. And the best part? It wasn't just me. I had spent the past few weeks reaching out to every loyal team member Sophia had discarded. The developers, the engineers, the real minds behind the software, the people she had undervalued and overlooked. And they had all come back to me. Not for money, not for status, for revenge. The ultimate payback. When SyncForge launched, it was an immediate success. Investors who had pulled out of Hypersync came to me first. Tech publications that had once praised Sophia were now writing about me. The same reporters who had celebrated her rise were now calling me the true genius behind it all. And Sophia? She was watching it happen. I knew she was. She wouldn't be able to help herself, because this wasn't just a personal betrayal for her. This was her greatest fear coming true. She had spent years making sure the world only knew her name. Now, the world was forgetting her entirely. Her last desperate call. Then, one night, my phone rang. For a second, I almost ignored it. Then, I saw the name. Sophia. I stared at it, debating. Then, slowly, I answered. She didn't say anything at first. I could hear her breathing. Slow, measured. Like she was forcing herself to keep it together. Finally, she spoke. Aaron, she said, voice thinner than I'd ever heard it before. I leaned back in my chair. Sophia. There was a long silence. Then, barely above a whisper. I need help. I didn't react. Didn't let my voice shift. Didn't let her hear the satisfaction I felt deep in my bones. I had been waiting for this. She had spent so long acting like she was untouchable. Like she was the goddess of the tech world. The woman who had everything. Now, she was begging me. I took my time, letting the silence stretch before I finally spoke. Sorry, Sophia. I let out a slow exhale. Only family is allowed. Then, I hung up. And just like that, I ended it for good. I stood there in the warm glow of the honeymoon suite, watching Mira unpack her suitcase with that little smile I'd fallen in love with years ago. Everything felt perfect, like a dream I didn't want to wake up from. Just a week ago, we'd gotten married under a sky full of stars, string lights twinkling above us as we danced our first dance. The wedding wasn't big, but it was ours small, romantic, unforgettable. Her parents, Clara and Marshall, had been all over the planning, picking flowers and fussing over table settings. I didn't mind much then. I figured they were just excited to see their only daughter tie the knot. Mira looked so happy that night, her white dress glowing in the moonlight as we whispered promises to each other. I thought that was it, the start of forever. But then, out of nowhere, just days after the wedding, Clara and Marshall suggested something odd. A family trip, they called it. Just Mira and them, heading off to Scottsdale for what they said was a relaxing getaway. It hit me like a punch to the gut. We'd barely been married a week, and they wanted to whisk her away already? I didn't love the idea, honestly. It stung. But Myra's eyes lit up when they brought it up. She squeezed my hand and said, "It's just a few days, babe. I'll be back before you know it." I didn't want to be the guy who says no, the jealous husband who can't let his wife breathe. So I swallowed the unease, nodded, and said, "Sure, go have fun." I thought I was being understanding, supportive even. Looking back now, that was my first mistake, and it's one I'll never stop kicking myself for. The moment I agreed, something shifted, like a crack forming in a glass you don't notice until it shatters. I drove her to the airport, kissed her goodbye, and watched her walk off with Clara and Marshall, their suitcases rolling behind them. Clara gave me this tight little smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes, and Marshall just nodded, his face blank as always. I told myself it was fine. She'd be back in 4 days, and we'd pick up right where we left off, newlyweds, head over heels, building our life together. I went home that night, sat on our couch, and stared at the empty space where she'd usually be curled up next to me. The house felt too quiet without her laugh, her humming as she made tea. I tried to shake it off, told myself I was overthinking things. It's just a trip, I kept repeating in my head. Just a trip. But deep down, I couldn't shake this gnawing feeling, like I'd just handed her over to something I didn't understand. I flipped on the TV, scrolled through my phone, anything to keep busy. I even texted her a quick, "Miss you already," with a heart emoji, hoping she'd reply fast. She did, a simple "miss you too," with a smiley face. That should have calmed me down, right? But it didn't. That night, I barely slept, tossing and turning in our too-big bed, wondering why her parents couldn't wait a little longer to drag her off. Why now? Why so soon? The next morning, I woke up to a picture she sent, her standing by a pool, sunglasses on, smiling wide. "Having fun already," she wrote. I stared at it for a long time, trying to feel happy for her. She looked beautiful like always. But something about the photo felt off, like there was a piece missing I couldn't see. I texted back, "Glad you're enjoying it. Tell Clara and Marshall hi." She didn't reply for hours, and when she did, it was just, "They say hi back." No details, no little stories about her day like she usually sent. I brushed it off. Maybe she was busy. Maybe she was just relaxing like they said. But that twist in my gut wouldn't go away. By day 2, I was pacing the house, replaying every moment of the wedding in my head. Clara's comments about my job, "It's nice you're so practical," and Marshall's silent stares started to feel heavier. I didn't get why they'd pushed so hard for this trip. Was it really just a family thing? Or was there something else going on? I didn't know it then, but that question would change everything. I'd find out soon enough that the honeymoon glow, the one I thought would last forever, was already fading, and I was the last one to see it. I stood in the kitchen that morning, flipping pancakes like I was some kind of hero, trying to make everything feel normal again. Mira had come back from Scottsdale the night before, and I'd picked her up from the airport with a big grin, expecting her to leap into my arms like she used to. But she didn't. She just gave me this small, tired smile and a quick hug before sliding into the passenger seat. The whole drive home, she stared out the window, barely saying a word. I asked how the trip was, and she mumbled, "Fine, just relaxing," without looking at me. I figured she was exhausted. 4 days with her parents would wear anyone out, right? So I let it go, told myself she'd bounce back after a good night's sleep. But now, standing there with the smell of syrup filling the air, I could feel it. Something was wrong. She sat across from me at the table, her hair still messy from bed, wearing one of my old shirts that used to make me smile seeing her in it. Today, it didn't. She poked at her food with her fork, not eating, just moving it around like she was lost in her head. I tried to catch her eye, but she wouldn't look up. Her laugh, that bright sound I'd hear every morning, was gone. Her hand didn't reach for mine like it always did when we ate together. It was like she was sitting there, but she wasn't really with me. I cleared my throat, tried to lighten things up. "So what did you do down there?" "Swim a lot. Get a tan." She shrugged, still staring at her plate. "Yeah, some of that." That was it, just flat, no spark. I waited, hoping she'd say more, but she didn't. The silence stretched out, heavy and thick, until finally, she put her fork down and looked at me. Her eyes were different, cold, like a wall had gone up between us. "I think we should take a break," she said, her voice so quiet I almost didn't hear it. My chest tightened, but I didn't let it show. I didn't yell or ask why or beg her to take it back. I just sat there, staring at her, feeling like the air had been sucked out of the room. A break? We'd been married for less than 2 weeks. My mind raced, but my face stayed calm. Too calm, maybe. I leaned back in my chair, took a slow sip of coffee, and then I smiled. Not a happy smile, but one that said I wasn't surprised, Not really. That's funny, I said, standing up and walking over to the counter where I'd left it, the folder. I picked it up, feeling its weight in my hand, and slid it across the table to her. Because I just got some information on that trip. Her eyes flicked to the folder, then back to me, confused. She hesitated, like she wasn't sure she wanted to touch it, but curiosity got the better of her. She pulled it closer, flipped it open, and started reading. The first page was just words, names, dates, a summary Marcus had typed up, but then she turned to the next one, and I saw her breath catch. She flipped faster, her fingers trembling as she went through the stack. Photos spilled out, grainy shots of her by the pool, at a restaurant, on a beach. Her eyes widened, darting over every image, every detail. I stood there, arms crossed, watching her face change, shock, then panic, then something else I couldn't name. She stopped on one photo, staring at it hard, her hands shaking so bad the paper rattled. It was her and him. Theo, laughing together, his arms slung around her shoulder like they'd known each other forever. Clara and Marshall were in the background, smiling like proud parents at a school play. Myra's head snapped up, her gaze locking onto mine for the first time that morning. "What is this?" she whispered. But before I could answer, the front door creaked open behind her. I didn't flinch. I'd heard the car pull up, the footsteps on the porch. Clara and Marshall stepped into the room, all casual like they'd just popped by for coffee. Clara's voice was bright, too bright. "Hope we're not interrupting anything," she said, setting a binder of wedding photos on the counter. Marshall just nodded at me, his face blank as ever. Mira didn't move, didn't turn around. She just kept staring at me, then flicked her eyes to her parents, the folder still open in front of her. I leaned against the counter, sipping my coffee again, letting the moment hang there. She wanted a break? Fine. But she was about to find out what that trip really was, and I wasn't the one who'd have to explain it. I stood in our living room, staring at the spot where Myra's suitcase had been before she left for that trip. The moment she walked out the door with Clara and Marshall, something in me twisted, a knot I couldn't untie. It wasn't just that they'd taken her away so soon after the wedding. It was the way they did it, like it was their right, like I didn't even factor in. Clara had never liked me. I'd known that from the start. She'd drop little jabs about my job, my clothes, my simple life, always with that fake smile plastered on her face. "You're so practical," she'd say, like it was an insult. Marshall was different, quiet, always watching me with those cold, calculating eyes, like he was sizing me up and finding me lacking. I brushed it off before, told myself it didn't matter what they thought as long as Mira loved me. But when they suggested that family trip, out of the blue, just days after I put a ring on her finger, it hit me harder than I wanted to admit. I didn't say no, I should have, but I didn't. Instead, I let her go, waved her off at the airport, and came home to an empty house. That first night alone, I couldn't sleep. I kept picturing her laughing with them, relaxing by some fancy pool, while I sat here like an idiot, waiting. By the second day, that twist in my gut turned into something sharper, doubt. Why did they need her now? What was so urgent? I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it, something they weren't telling me. That's when I picked up the phone and called Marcus. He's my cousin, a private investigator down in Scottsdale, the kind of guy who doesn't ask too many questions if you're family. "Hey, man," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Myra's down there with her parents. Can you keep an eye on them? Follow them? Maybe. Especially if someone else shows up." He didn't hesitate. "You got it," he said. "Anything specific I'm looking for?" I paused, not sure how to put it. "Just anything that doesn't feel right. I don't know, something's off." He didn't push, just told me he'd get on it and call me back. I hung up, feeling a little stupid but mostly relieved. If it was nothing, I'd laugh it off later. If it wasn't, well, I'd deal with that when it came. Less than 48 hours later, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Check your email. You're gonna want to see this." I grabbed my laptop, heart pounding, and opened the message. There it was, a folder full of files. Videos, photos, receipts, timestamps. I clicked the first video, and my stomach dropped. It wasn't some quiet family retreat. There was Mira, sitting at a restaurant table, laughing, her hair catching the sunlight. Clara and Marshall were there too, but they weren't the problem. It was the guy next to her, some tan, smug-looking jerk with a grin that screamed money. Theo, Marcus called him in the notes. Some rich investor's son, dripping in fake charm, leaning too close to my wife. I watched as he said something, And she laughed again, her real laugh, the one I hadn't heard in days. Clara clapped her hands like it was the best thing she'd ever seen, and Marshall nodded along, all proud. I clicked through the photos next: dinners, drinks by the pool, walks on the beach. Theo's arm around her shoulder, her smiling up at him. Clara snapping pictures like it was a damn photo shoot. Receipts showed they'd all stayed at the same hotel, some swanky place I'd never afford. Marcus even got a shot of Theo handing Mira a drink, their hands brushing, and she didn't pull away. I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling the blood drain from my face. My wife, my brand new wife, wasn't on a relaxing getaway with her parents. She was being paraded around like a prize, introduced to some guy they'd picked out for her. And she didn't push him away. She didn't call me, didn't text me, didn't say a word about any of it. I closed the laptop, my hand shaking, and just sat there in the dark. The house was quiet, but my head was screaming. I trusted her. I trusted them. And this was what I got. It broke me, not in a loud, crashing way, but slow and deep, like a crack splitting through everything I thought we had. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just waited for her to come home, knowing nothing would ever be the same. I stood in our living room, leaning against the counter with my coffee mug in hand, watching the chaos unfold like it was some kind of twisted play I'd bought tickets to. Mira sat at the table, still clutching that folder I'd handed her, her eyes darting between the photos and her parents like she couldn't decide who to yell at first. Clara and Marshall had just walked in, perfect timing, really, acting like nothing was wrong. Clara set that binder of wedding photos down with a little thud, her voice all chipper as she said, "Hope we're not interrupting." I almost laughed right there, but I held it in, took a slow sip of my coffee instead. The bitterness matched the moment. Myra's hands were shaking as she flipped through the pictures again. Dinners with Theo, drinks by the pool, that smug jerk grinning at her like he'd already won something. She'd been quiet since she opened the folder, but now she looked up, her voice sharp and low. "What is this?" She wasn't asking me, though. Her eyes were locked on Clara, who stood there with that tight, fake smile she always wore when she was cornered. Marshall didn't even look up from his phone, just kept scrolling like this was all boring to him. "We just wanted you to meet someone new," Clara said, waving her hand like it was no big deal. "You didn't give us a chance before the wedding, Mira. It was all too rushed, don't you think?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Too rushed? They'd had months to say something, to object, to pull their little stunts before I put a ring on her finger. But no, they waited until after the vows, after the cake, after we danced under those damn string lights. I set my mug down, the clink loud in the tense air, and crossed my arms. Myra's head snapped toward her mom, her face going red. "Meet someone new? Are you serious?" Clara shrugged, like she was explaining why she'd picked a different wine for dinner. "We thought you'd like him. Theo's a good match, successful, charming. We didn't get to weigh in before, so we figured, we?" Mira cut in, her voice rising. "Who's we?" "You and Dad." Marshall finally glanced up, his face blank as ever. "We just wanted to see you happy," he muttered, like that explained everything. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I laughed. It came out loud and bitter, bouncing off the walls. "Happy," I said, stepping closer to the table. "You think dragging her off to meet some rich guy a week after our wedding is about her happiness?" Myra's eyes flicked to me, wide and glassy, but I wasn't done. "You set her up with him, dinners, drinks, beach walks, like she's some prize to hand off. And you," I pointed at Clara, "you're standing there acting like it's normal to pimp out your married daughter." Clara's smile dropped, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Don't be crude," she snapped. "It wasn't like that. We just gave her an option." "An option?" Myra's voice broke as she shoved the folder away, papers sliding across the table. "I'm married. I didn't ask for options." She stood up, her chair scraping the floor, and turned to me. "I didn't know they were planning this, I swear." I stared at her, my jaw tight. Did I believe her? Part of me wanted to. God, I wanted to. But those photos were burned into my head. Her laughing with Theo, his arm around her, her not pulling away. "You didn't know?" I said slowly. "But you didn't stop it either, did you?" Her mouth opened, then closed, like she didn't have an answer. Clara jumped in, her voice sharp now. "Oh, come on, Mira, don't act so innocent. You enjoyed yourself down there. We all saw it." That hit me like a slap. I looked at Mira, waiting for her to deny it, to say something, anything, to prove Clara wrong. But she just stood there, her hands clenched at her sides, her eyes dropping to the floor. I didn't mean for it to happen like that, she whispered. Like what? I pressed, stepping closer. Like you flirting with some guy your parents picked out while I was sitting here thinking you were just relaxing? She flinched, but I didn't back off. You let them take you there, Mira. You let them parade you around like I didn't exist. Marshall cleared his throat, finally putting his phone down. Let's not blow this out of proportion, he said, his tone calm, like he was negotiating a deal. No one forced her to do anything. She could have said no. I turned on him, my voice steady but cold. And you could have stayed out of my marriage. But here we are. The room went quiet, the weight of it all pressing down on us. Clara crossed her arms. Marshall went back to his phone, and Mira just stood there, looking lost. I picked up my coffee again, took a sip, and let the silence stretch. They thought they could play this off like it was nothing. But I wasn't letting it go that easy. I stood there in the living room, my coffee long gone cold in my hand, watching Mira tremble like a leaf caught in a storm. She was still on her feet, the folder of photos scattered across the table like a crime scene, her eyes bouncing between me and her parents. Clara's words hung in the air. We just gave her an option, and I could feel the heat rising in my chest. But I kept it locked down, my face hard as stone. Myra's voice cracked as she turned to her mom. Are you telling me you flew me out there to meet someone else after my wedding? She sounded like she couldn't believe it, like she was hoping Clara would laugh and say it was all a big misunderstanding. But Clara didn't laugh. She scoffed instead, rolling her eyes like Mira was being a kid throwing a tantrum. Sweetheart, don't be so dramatic, she said, smoothing her hair back. We didn't force you into anything. We just wanted options on the table, that's all. Options. Like my wife was a car they were test driving, and Theo was the shiny new model they'd rather park in the garage. I couldn't wrap my head around it, how they could stand there, so calm, so smug, acting like this was normal. Marshall finally piped up, his voice flat and steady, like he was reading a grocery list. Look, Mira, you rushed into this marriage. We didn't get a say. We were just thinking long-term for you, for the family. That's when I lost it, not loud, not yelling, but a laugh ripped out of me, sharp and ugly. It echoed in the room, cutting through their excuses like a knife. Long-term, I said, setting my mug down hard enough to make the table shake. You arranged for your married daughter to flirt with some guy you handpicked like he's a job candidate? You think that's thinking long-term? I turned to Mira, my eyes locking on hers. And you, what? You just went along with it. Her face went pale, her lips parting like she wanted to say something, but nothing came out at first. Then she shook her head fast, her hands flying up. I didn't know they were doing this. Her voice was desperate, pleading, but it didn't hit me the way it used to. I stepped closer, my voice low and tight. Didn't know what, Mira? That he'd kiss your cheek while your mom snapped a photo? That they'd have you laughing and drinking with him like I wasn't waiting back? She froze, her eyes wide, and I could see it. She was replaying it all in her head, every moment I'd seen in those pictures. I didn't, she started, but I cut her off, holding up the photo that had been stuck in my mind since I saw it, Theo's arm around her, her smiling up at him, Clara grinning in the background. You didn't what? I asked. You didn't smile? You didn't let him get close? You didn't enjoy it? She stared at the picture, her hands dropping to her sides, and I could tell she was about to crack. Her mouth opened, her breath hitching like she was going to scream or cry or both. But before she could, her phone buzzed on the table, loud and sharp, breaking the moment. She flinched, glancing down at it, and I saw the name flash on the screen, Leona, her best friend from Scottsdale. Mira grabbed it, her fingers clumsy, and read the text out loud, her voice shaking. Theo's still in town, bragging that you two were meant to be, that your parents promised him everything. The words hit like a punch, and she looked up slow, her eyes locking on Clara. What does that mean? She whispered. Clara didn't even blink, just tilted her head like it was no big deal. We may have encouraged him a little, she said, her tone light, like she was admitting to buying him a coffee. But he misunderstood. We just gave him a small gift, invited him to dinner. Nothing serious. Myra's jaw dropped, and she stared at her mom like she'd never seen her before. You promised him I'd leave my husband? She asked, her voice rising, cracking at the edges. Clara shrugged, actually shrugged, like it was all just a silly mix-up. We wanted what's best for you, sweetheart. Theo's a catch. We thought you'd see that. I just stood there, watching it all fall apart, my arms crossed tight across my chest. Mira turned to me, her face a mess of shock and guilt. I didn't know, she said again, softer this time, like she was begging me to believe her. But I didn't say anything. I couldn't. Because even if she didn't know the whole plan, she'd still gone along with it, smiling, laughing, letting Theo in while I was here, alone, thinking she was mine. The room went quiet, except for the faint hum of Myra's phone still buzzing with Leona's messages. Clara adjusted her purse, Marshall checked his watch, and Mira just stood there, looking like she might explode. Me? I stayed still, letting it sink in. My wife, my marriage, my whole damn life was a game to them, and I was the only one who hadn't been clued in. I leaned against the counter in the living room, my arms still crossed, watching Mira clutch her phone like it was a lifeline. That text from Leona, Theo's still in town, bragging that you two were meant to be, that your parents promised him everything, hung in the air like smoke, choking the room. Myra's voice had trembled when she read it out loud, and now she was staring at Clara, her eyes wide and wet, waiting for an answer. What does that mean? She'd asked, her words sharp but fragile, like glass about to break. Clara didn't even flinch, just tilted her head with that smug little smile she always had, like she was above it all. We may have encouraged him, she said, her voice smooth and casual, like she was talking about picking out curtains. But he misunderstood. We just gave him a little gift, invited him to dinner. Nothing criminal, Mira. I almost choked on the air. A little gift? Dinner? This wasn't some friendly meet and greet. They'd flown her out there, paraded her around with this guy, and now they were acting like it was no big deal. Myra's head snapped back, her mouth open like she couldn't believe what she was hearing. You promised him I'd leave my husband? She said, her voice climbing higher, shaking harder. Clara shrugged, like it was nothing. We wanted what's best for you, she said. Theo's a good man, successful, from a solid family. We thought you'd see that eventually. I stood there, my jaw tight, feeling the anger bubble up, but keeping it locked down. Best for her? They didn't give a damn about what she wanted, or what I wanted. This was their game, their rules, and I was just the guy in the way. Mira turned to me, her face pale, her eyes pleading. I didn't know, she said again, like it was the only thing she could say. I swear, I didn't know they were planning this. I looked at her, really looked at her, and all I could see were those photos, her laughing with Theo, his arm around her, her not pushing him away. You didn't know? I said, my voice low and steady. But you didn't stop it either, did you? She flinched, her hands twisting together, and I could tell she was scrambling for something to say. It wasn't like that, she whispered. I thought it was just friendly. I didn't think. You didn't think. I cut in, stepping closer. You didn't think it'd look bad to let some guy hang all over you while your parents cheered him on? You didn't think to call me, to tell me what was going on. She shook her head fast, tears starting to spill over. I didn't want to worry you. I thought it was nothing, just mom and dad being them. I laughed, short and bitter. Them? You mean the people who think our marriage is a mistake they can fix with a better offer? Clara jumped in, her voice sharp now. That's enough, she said, pointing at me. You're blowing this out of proportion. We didn't force her to do anything. She could have walked away. Walked away. I turned on her, my voice rising for the first time. You flew her out there, stuck her in a hotel with this guy, and fed her lies about how he's her future. What was she supposed to do? Run back home with no car, no plan, while you two kept pushing? Marshall cleared his throat, finally looking up from his phone. Let's calm down, he said, his tone flat. No one's saying we planned a divorce. We just thought she'd see reason. Reason. That word hit me like a brick. They thought I was the unreasonable one, the guy she'd married, the guy she'd promised to love, the guy who'd been waiting here like a fool while they played matchmaker. Mira sank back into her chair, her hands covering her face. I can't believe this, she muttered. I can't believe you'd do this to me. Clara sighed, like she was tired of explaining herself. Mira, we've always wanted you to have the best. This marriage, it was fast. We didn't get a chance to guide you. Guide me. Myra's head shot up, her voice cracking. You think setting me up with some guy behind my husband's back is guiding me? I watched her, waiting to see if she'd turn that anger on me too. Blame me for digging this up, for putting it all out there. But she didn't. She just sat there, staring at her parents like they were strangers. I didn't sleep with him, she said suddenly, looking at me now. I didn't. I wouldn't do that. Her eyes were begging me to believe her, but I didn't say anything. I just nodded once, letting her words sit there. Maybe she didn't sleep with him, but she'd let him in, let them all in, and that cut just as deep. The room went quiet again, the tension thick enough to choke on. Clara adjusted her purse, Marshall tapped his phone, and Mira wiped her eyes. I stayed where I was, watching my wife realize she'd been a pawn in their game, and wondering if she'd ever really been mine at all. I stood in the kitchen the next day, staring at the coffee pot like it could fix everything if I just brewed it strong enough. After that blowout with Mira and her parents, I'd slept on the couch, not because she asked me to, but because I couldn't stand being in our bed, smelling her shampoo on the pillows, pretending everything was fine. She'd gone upstairs after Clara and Marshall left, her face red and puffy from crying, and I didn't follow. I needed space, time to think, time to figure out what came next. The folder was still on the table, photos peeking out like a bad memory I couldn't shake. I'd shown her the truth, but it didn't feel like a win. It felt like a punch to the gut that kept on giving. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I wasn't letting this fester in the dark anymore. If Clara and Marshall wanted to play their little game, I'd drag it into the light for everyone to see. So I sent out invitations, short, simple texts to Clara, Marshall, Mira, Theo, and a handful of friends and family who'd been at the wedding. Photo shoot at the venue. I wrote, "One last memory from the big day. Be there at 6. Clara replied right away with a cheery, "Oh, how lovely. We'll be there." Mira texted back a hesitant, "Is this necessary?" I didn't sugarcoat it. "Yeah," I wrote. "It's time people knew the truth." She didn't argue after that, just sent a quiet, "Okay." The rest confirmed quick. Leona, Marcus, a few cousins who danced with us under those string lights. Even Theo RSVP'd with a cocky, wouldn't miss it. I smirked at that. Good. Let him walk right into it. That evening, I got to the venue early, the same place we'd gotten married, with its big open room and wooden beams, the spot where I'd thought we'd started something real. I set up a projector, hooked it to my laptop, and laid out the evidence Marcus had sent me. Photos, videos, receipts, all of it. The reception table was still there, the one we'd cut the cake on, and I dragged it to the center, piling the files on top. People started trickling in, Leona first, giving me a nod like she knew something was up, then Marcus, who clapped me on the shoulder and said, "You sure about this, man?" I nodded. "Yeah. No more hiding." Clara and Marshall showed up next. Clara in pearls like she was going to a gala. Marshall in his usual suit, phone already in hand. Mira came in behind them, quiet, her eyes darting to me and then away. She looked small, like the weight of it all was crushing her, but I didn't soften. Not yet. Then Theo swaggered in, tanned and grinning, acting like he owned the place. "Nice spot," he said, winking at Mira. She didn't smile back. I waited until everyone was settled, about 20 people, some curious, some confused, then stepped to the front. "Thanks for coming," I said, my voice steady. "Thought we'd take a look back at the wedding and what's happened since." I clicked the projector on, and the first slide lit up the wall. A photo of Mira and me cutting the cake, smiling, happy. There were a few us from the crowd, but I didn't linger. Next slide, Scottsdale. Mira at the pool with Theo, his arm around her. A murmur rippled through the room. I clicked again, dinner, Theo leaning close, Clara laughing. Then the beach walk, the drinks, the hotel receipts. With every slide, the whispers grew louder, eyes darting to Mira, to her parents, to me. She sank lower in her chair, her hands over her face. Clara's smile tightened, but she didn't move. Theo shifted, looking less smug now. Then I played the video. Marcus had caught it from a distance, Clara's voice clear as day, saying, "This marriage is just a phase. Theo's the real future." The room went dead silent, like someone had sucked the air out. I let it hang there, the words echoing, then turned the projector off. "That's it," I said, crossing my arms. "That's what they've been up to while I've been here, thinking I had a wife." Mira stood up fast, her chair scraping loud. "I didn't know," she shouted, her voice breaking. "I didn't plan this." I looked at her, my chest tight. "Maybe not," I said. "But you didn't stop it either." Clara jumped in, her voice sharp. "This is ridiculous. You're making a scene over nothing." Theo nodded, trying to play it cool. "Yeah, man, chill. It's not like we shut up," I snapped, cutting him off. "You don't get to talk." He blinked, surprised, and sat back down. The room buzzed, friends whispering, cousins glaring at Clara and Marshall. Leona stood up, arms crossed. "You guys are unbelievable," she said to Myra's parents. "She's married, and you're shopping her around like she's for sale?" Marshall finally spoke, his tone calm. "It's not like that. We just gave Theo a chance to meet her." I laughed, cold and hard. "A chance? You gave him a weekend suite and a promise." The truth was out now, raw and ugly. And I stood there, watching it sink in, wondering if I just burned everything down or set myself free. I stood in the middle of that venue, the projector still humming behind me, watching the room explode into silence so thick it felt like I could touch it. The video had just finished, Clara's voice saying, "This marriage is just a phase. Theo's the real future," and it was like a bomb had gone off, leaving nothing but stunned faces and wide eyes. Mira was on her feet, her hand shaking, her voice cracking as she yelled, "I didn't know." I'd heard that line too many times now, and it didn't hit me the same anymore. I just looked at her, my arms crossed, and said, "Maybe not. But you didn't stop it either." That shut her up fast. She sank back into her chair, her face buried in her hands. Clara jumped in, her voice sharp and high, like she could still control this. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, standing up straighter in her pearls. "You're making a scene over nothing." Theo nodded, trying to back her up, his grin fading but still clinging to that cocky edge. "Yeah, man, chill. It's not like we..." "Shut up," I said, my voice cutting through his like a blade. He blinked, startled, and sat back down, his hands up like he was surrendering. The room buzzed, friends whispering, cousins shooting glares at Clara and Marshall, Leona glaring like she wanted to throw punches. Then Mira found her voice again, turning to her parents. "Mom, Dad, did you pay him?" she asked, her words slow and heavy, like she was afraid of the answer. Marshall looked up from his phone, finally putting it down, his face blank as ever. "A few gifts," he said, shrugging. "A weekend suite. It's not illegal." Theo piped up, his voice softer now, like he was trying to save himself. "I thought it was love," he said, glancing at Mira. She whipped around to face him, her eyes blazing. "Love? You thought I'd just leave my husband because you showed up with a tan and a smile?" "I couldn't help it," I laughed, short and bitter. "Guess he's not as smart as your parents thought." Theo's face went red, but he didn't say anything back. Mira turned to me, her eyes wet and desperate. "I didn't know," she said again, stepping closer. "I swear, I didn't sleep with him." "I didn't, but you didn't stop it," I said, my voice steady, cutting her off. "You let it happen. You laughed, smiled, shared drinks. You let them decide who you should end up with." She reached for my hand, her fingers brushing mine, but I pulled back. "Don't," I said, and she froze, her arm dropping like it weighed a ton. The room was spinning now, everyone talking at once, voices overlapping. Theo turned on Clara, his cool cracking. "You said she wanted out," he barked, pointing at her. Clara snapped back, her composure slipping. She would have, if he hadn't stuck his nose in. She jabbed a finger at me, her face twisting like I was the villain here. I just stood there, letting it all crash around me. Leona stepped forward, her arms crossed tight. "You're disgusting," she said to Clara. "She's your daughter, not some doll you can trade up when you don't like the groom." A few cousins nodded, muttering agreement, and one of them, my cousin Jake, called out, "What kind of parents pull this crap?" Clara spun on him, her voice rising. "We were protecting her future. He's not good enough." She pointed at me again, and that was it. The room erupted. People shouting, chairs scraping, Mira crying louder now, saying, "Stop it, just stop," over and over. I didn't move, didn't yell back. I just watched, letting them tear each other apart. Marshall tried to play peacemaker, standing up with his hands out. "Everyone calm down," he said, like he could still fix this. "It's not what it looks like." "It's exactly what it looks like," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "You tried to sell my wife to some rich kid because you didn't like me. And she let you try." Mira sobbed, shaking her head. I didn't mean to, but you did," I said, looking right at her. "You didn't call me. You didn't walk away. You stayed." She crumpled, sitting back down, her hands over her face again. Theo stood up, grabbing his jacket. "I'm out," he muttered, heading for the door. "You people are crazy." Clara shouted after him, "You're not innocent here." But he didn't stop. The cousins started arguing with Marshall. Leona was still ripping into Clara, and Mira just sat there, broken. I stepped back, leaning against the table, the folder still open behind me. The truth was out, ugly, loud, and messy, and I didn't feel better. I felt empty. Everyone knew now, but it didn't fix anything. Mira looked up at me, her eyes begging for something, forgiveness, maybe, or a way back. But I didn't have it to give. "I'm sorry," she whispered, but I just shook my head. The chaos kept going, voices bouncing off the walls, but I tuned it out. This was their mess now. I'd done my part. I stood in the kitchen 2 weeks later, stirring a pot of soup I didn't even want, just trying to keep my hands busy. The fallout from that night at the venue hit fast and hard, like a storm I'd kicked up but couldn't control. Mira moved out the next day, packed a bag, said she needed space, and left without looking back. I didn't stop her. I didn't say much at all, just watched her go, the door clicking shut behind her like the end of something I'd been holding onto too tight. The house felt empty after that, too big and too quiet, but I didn't mind. It was better than pretending everything was fine. Clara and Marshall tried to spin it their way, calling up relatives and friends with some story about how it wasn't working out, and it was mutual. I heard it secondhand from my cousin Jake, Clara's voice all smooth and sad, like she was the victim here. They just weren't compatible, she'd said. We saw it coming. Compatible. That word stuck in my throat, bitter and wrong. They didn't care about compatibility when they were shoving Theo in her face, smiling for the camera while I sat here like a fool. But their little lie didn't hold up long. Theo couldn't keep his mouth shut. He started posting online, pictures from Scottsdale, tagging Mira in shots of them by the pool, at dinner, on the beach. Good times with good people. He captioned one, smirking in the frame. Then he dropped a video, him laughing, saying, "Her parents knew we were the real deal." That's when it blew up. Leona saw it first, sent me a screenshot with a quick, "This idiot's digging his own grave." She wasn't wrong. The story spread fast. Friends shared it. Family called me asking what the hell was going on, and pretty soon it hit X, where people I didn't even know were picking it apart. "Who does this to their own kid?" one post read. "Shady as hell," said another. Clara's event planning business took a hit. Vendors canceled, clients backed out, saying they didn't trust her anymore. Marshall got dropped from some board he'd been on, a quiet email letting him know his personal conduct didn't align with their values. Theo? He vanished, deleted his accounts, and went dark after the backlash hit. I didn't feel sorry for any of them. They'd made their bed, and now they were lying in it. Mira reached out after 2 weeks, a text that popped up while I was eating alone at the table. "Can we talk?" it said. I stared at it for a long time, my thumb hovering over the screen. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let her sit with the mess she'd helped make. But I wasn't that guy, not yet anyway. "Sure," I texted back. "Come by tomorrow." She showed up at noon, standing on the porch like she wasn't sure she was welcome. I let her in, pointed to the couch, and sat across from her in the armchair. She looked tired, dark circles under her eyes, her hair pulled back messy, like she hadn't slept much. "I'm sorry," she started, her voice small. "I know I keep saying that, but I mean it." I didn't see what they were doing until it was too late. I nodded, letting her talk, my hands resting on my knees. "I didn't want Theo," she said, looking at me now. "I didn't want any of it. I didn't know how to stop them. They've always been like that, pushing, pulling, deciding what's best for me. I should have told you. I should have left." "Yeah," I said, my voice flat. "You should have." She winced, but I didn't soften it. "You weren't just married to me, Mira," I went on. "You were married to them. Every step of the way, they had their hands on you, and you let them." Her eyes filled up, tears spilling over, but I didn't move. "I messed up," she said, wiping her face. "I know I did, but I love you. I still do." Those words hit me hard, stirring up something I'd buried under all the anger and hurt. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the girl I danced with under the string lights, the one I'd promised forever to. But I also saw the girl in those photos, laughing with Theo, letting her parents steer her away from me. "I believe you," I said finally, slow and careful. "But that doesn't fix it. You didn't fight for us. You didn't even try. And I can't forget that." She cried harder, nodding like she'd expected it. "I don't know how to make it right," she said. "You can't," I told her, standing up. "Not now. Maybe not ever." She stayed for a while, crying, talking, begging me to give her a chance, but I didn't budge. When she left, the house went quiet again, and I sat there, staring at the spot where she'd been. I wasn't mad anymore, not like before. I just felt done. The world knew the truth now, and so did I. That was enough for today, at least. I stood in the middle of the venue again, the same one where Mira and I had gotten married, but this time it felt different, like a weight had lifted, even if the scars were still there. It was a month after she'd moved out, a month since that messy night with the projector and the shouting, a month since the world saw what her parents had tried to pull. Tonight, I wasn't here to fight or prove anything. I was here to let it go. I'd invited my real family, my real friends, the people who'd stuck by me through all this crap. No Clara, No Marshall, no Theo, no Mira. Just the ones who mattered. The room smelled like cake and coffee, and there was laughter bouncing off the walls, real and warm, not the fake stuff I'd gotten used to. I'd set up a few tables, nothing fancy, just some folding chairs, a spread of food, and a playlist of songs that didn't remind me of her. Leona showed up first, hugging me tight and saying, "You look better, you know that?" I smiled, a real one, not the tight-lipped thing I'd been faking for weeks. "Feel better," I told her. Marcus came next, clapping me on the back and handing me a beer. "Proud of you, man," he said. "Takes guts to burn it all down and walk away." I nodded, popping the cap off. Didn't feel like guts at the time, just felt like surviving. More people trickled in. My cousins, Jake and Sarah, who'd been at the wedding and the blowout, grinning like they were glad to see me standing tall. My buddy Tom from work, who'd texted me every day after Mira left, just to check in. Even my mom showed up, fussing over the food and telling me I needed to eat more. It wasn't a big crowd, maybe 20 people, but it was enough. The room filled up with noise, talking, laughing, the clink of plates, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. We ate, swapped stories, and I let myself relax, leaning back in my chair, watching them all. Leona told everyone how she'd ripped into Clara that night, making them laugh, and Marcus bragged about his sneaky camera work in Scottsdale, calling himself the family spy. It was light, easy, the kind of night I hadn't had since before the wedding. After a while, I stood up, tapping my beer bottle with a spoon to get their attention. The room quieted down, all eyes on me, and I took a deep breath. "Hey, thanks for coming," I said, my voice steady. "I know the last few months have been a lot. You've all seen it, the good, the bad, the ugly, and you're still here. That means something." A few nods, a couple of smiles. I went on. "I thought losing Mira was the end of me, you know? Like I'd failed at the one thing I wanted most. But I figured something out. Sometimes a broken vow is a blessing in disguise." I raised my bottle. To starting over. They cheered, lifting their drinks, and I took a long sip, feeling the words settle in my chest. It wasn't just talk, I meant it. Losing her hurt like hell, but staying tied to that family, to their games and their lies, would have been worse. I sat back down, and the night rolled on. Cake got cut, music got louder, and Jake even dragged me out to dance, laughing when I stepped on his toes. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. As the hours passed, I stepped outside for some air, leaning against the railing where Mira and I had stood that wedding night, looking at the stars. I could still see her in that white dress, smiling up at me, promising forever. For a second, it stung. The memory, the what could have been, but then I let it go. She wasn't here anymore, and I didn't need her to be. I'd spent weeks replaying it all. Her laugh with Theo, Clara's smug face, Marshall's cold stares. But tonight, I didn't feel bitter. I felt awake, like I'd finally opened my eyes after a long, bad dream. Leona came out, standing next to me, her hands in her pockets. "You good?" she asked. I nodded, looking out at the dark. "Yeah, better than good." She smiled. "She's still asking about you, you know? Mira called me yesterday, wanted to know if you'd softened up." I shrugged. "Doesn't matter. I'm done looking back." Leona bumped my shoulder. "That's my boy." We stood there a while, quiet, the party noise drifting out behind us. When I went back in, they were still laughing, still eating, still celebrating. I grabbed another slice of cake, sat with Marcus and Tom, and let myself laugh too. This was my ending, not the one I'd planned, not the one with Mira by my side, but a better one. I was free, not just from her, but from the weight of it all. And that was worth toasting to.